Steve, as the course director on the Power Project Finance programme, can you tell us a little bit about your background and experience?
Pleasure, Jeff. My project finance career spanned something like 25 years out of a 30-year banking career in total. First 5 years I was a graduate trainee, I did some general corporate banking, but gravitated into project finance quite quickly. And most of my project finance was really devoted to oil and gas on the one hand and power. So very much an energy orientated career, if you like, in project finance. I began my project finance career with the HSBC Group. From HSBC I moved to set up a small investment banking boutique, if you like, with a focus on project finance advisory with a couple of my colleagues from HSBC. I moved back into the city proper with Sumitomo Bank, and at Sumitomo Bank I worked on some gas-fired power, particularly in the Middle East. From Sumitomo I moved to Commerzbank briefly, but then ended my career, my formal banking career at RBS, which at the time was very much a high flyer in project finance, a natural mandated lead arranger, if you like, with a very strong oil and gas team, very strong power team. And I also sat on what we called our one-pager committee within RBS, which meant that I was one of the people who reviewed transactions before they went to credit committee to see that they were sound in wind and limb, and I looked at a lot of renewable and conventional power projects on that basis. So energy, and including power, has been a strong theme running through my career.
And Steve, the course evolved out of the generic project finance workshop. Could you tell us a little bit more about how the power specific content feeds into the course?
Sure. Well, given the success, I'm pleased to say, of the generic project finance offering, we had quite a bit of demand for sector-specific courses, and power being one of the strongest ones. And I guess renewables has been a very strong theme within the demand for something specific on power project finance. So we developed this course really on the same sort of foundation, the same sort of bedrock as the other sector-specific offerings that we do. So the core of it really, or the underlying foundation of it, is the toolkit. I won't describe the toolkit in detail here. I have described that in the video that we did for the generic project finance offering, so people who want to hear more about it might want to go and look at that video. But fundamentally the toolkit is qualitative risk analysis by the lender, quantitative risk analysis and debt structuring, and documentation. And we use that as a foundation for all of the sector-specific courses, really to provide people with a template, if you like. I think it's much better to give people a template that they can apply to almost any project that lands on their desk, because that's a much more usable tool. It's better to do that, I think, than simply to describe how project financing has been done in the power sector in the past, or even in the present. I think what we want to do is to give people a toolkit. Yeah. So building on that basic toolkit, what we do is to look at how project finance is used in power, in both the conventional power and renewable sectors. So in the conventional power sector, we look at, for example, PPA-based transactions. The PPA, I guess, being, if you like, the tool of choice for structuring power transactions in the emerging markets. We also look at tolling transactions, which are obviously used much more in denationalised, liberalised, regulated markets, and also merchant power plants, though, of course, in today's environment, as people in the sector will know, they are much more difficult to arrange, and there's only a few places in the world where we're still seeing merchant transactions being done. So we look at the shape, format, structure of project financings in those areas, and we use case studies to cement and reinforce what's taught in the chalk and talk sessions, if you like. Then we look at renewables. We examine the different methodologies of support for renewable power, so green certificate approaches and feed-in tariff approaches, and look at the bankability, the respective bankability of each of those. And once again, we'll use case studies to reinforce that. So for example, we have a straw burning power station which we use effectively as part of the toolkit, in fact, to kind of reinforce the particular issues that arise in renewable structures.
And what would you say are the real practical take-homes one would expect to gain as a result of coming on the course, Steve?
Well, in common, Jeff, with the other sector-specific and even the generic project finance course, the emphasis is very much on practicality, really, on usability. Yeah. We don't want the course to be descriptive or in any way purely academic. This is really a course for practitioners, either from the sponsor side or from the lender side. Lenders because they want to know how to do it. Borrowers and sponsors because they want to understand how the banker approaches it, and for them to maximise the debt, which is usually one of their key objectives, they need to understand, what makes the banker tick his boxes and get comfortable and agree to do 70-30 debt to equity rather than 60-40, for example. So it needs to be practical, and we try to deal with that in a number of ways. First of all, giving people the toolkit, qualitative risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis and documentation. There's a strong emphasis on the use of mind maps and checklists. Yeah, and I find that people love those. It gives them a strong sense of security to feel, yes, there is a list I can go have a look at when a new project lands on my desk. And what I often say to people is, if I came to their office and found that they'd glued one of my checklists up on their wall, they would make an old man very happy. Yeah. And the other aspect, of course, is the tips and tricks of the trade. I'd like to feel that what I bring to the table is, the distilled experience of 25 to 30 years. So I've been through the hoops a few times. I do understand the sort of things that get debated the most, the areas where it's quite pointless to debate because one side will simply not give up, yeah, and the ways in which some of those hot topics tend to get resolved, and I think that's all very useful for people's future work. So I would like to feel that people take away the toolkit, which is both the reference tool and a template, some tips and tricks, and some pretty useful mind maps and checklists.
Steve, thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.